Hello and welcome to the C3 Method Patreon weekly Q&A with your host, Robert Polenik. Our goal is to educate you on everything health and fitness related with a clear, concise, and customized approach. We want you to know what you need to know and how to apply it in a way that fits you best. So this is our weekly Q&A. This is for the week of July 7th. All the questions come from our Patreon members. If you would like to sign up for Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/C3 method. And the 3 is spelled out T-H-R-E-E, so C-T-H-R-E-E method. There you go. You can also reach out to us if you want some more information or anything like that from our website, which is c3method.com. The benefits of the Patreon service is there's monthly programming that is written for you. We also have templates so you can create your own workouts. We have nutrition education, and then you also get to ask questions in this weekly Q&A. There are a ton of questions that I answer for Patreon members outside of this Q&A. I do answer direct messages and send replies every single week. There's just sometimes questions or topics that wouldn't lend themselves well to this type of format, so I answer those directly in Patreon. So now you'll get to see kind of the other questions that I think might be fun for everyone to learn from. Okay, let's get started. Our first question is going to be nutrition. Do the calories in gum count if you don't swallow the gum? Unfortunately, yes, they do. The base of the gum, like the chewy part of it, isn't something that we actually digest and break down and get calories from. It's kind of like fiber. It kind of just goes like right through you. But the flavoring systems in gum, whether it's actual sugar or sugar alcohols, our body digests that through the linings of our cheeks. So when we chew the gum and it mixes with saliva, we either ingest that and it comes down into our stomach, or it actually starts to be digested through our cheeks. So yes, even if you don't swallow chewing gum, you still get all the calories that you would see in the nutrition fact label. I know, it's quite a bummer, but that's a fun question. Question number 2, how can I increase protein without just eating more meat? Yes, this is a very common question. There's tons of protein foods, like quote-unquote whole foods, that aren't supplements. Cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, you can do dairy, eggs would be a good example. There's cheese, there's, oh my gosh, there's a bajillion, like tofu is what a lot of the vegans, vegetarians use. There's also protein pairings that we use with vegetarians, like rice and beans. Proteins from vegetables tend to be what's called an incomplete protein. It doesn't have all the amino acids that would make a full protein, which you would more commonly find in animal proteins. But you can pair together certain plant proteins, and that does make a complete protein. So you can actually just do a quick Google search, type in vegetarian complete protein pairings, and that would be something that would show you good options like rice and beans. I think almonds and spinach is another combination. There's a ton that I use with clients, but that would be an example. Is you can use plant proteins, and then that would include like nuts, nut butters. But often with plant proteins, you're going to struggle to try to get enough protein but not have carbohydrates or dietary fats, as an example of nuts, getting really high while trying to chase down enough protein. The protein percentage tends to be not great. There is protein in there, but you're going to get a lot of fats and carbs with that protein, and that tends to push someone's total calorie intake too high. So you can use the other sources that I mentioned, and then you can use protein bars and protein powders. You wouldn't want to have a whole day of, like 3 or 4 meals of just protein powder. Probably not going to be the best for your digestion. It's not going to be the best absorption rate. You can definitely mix protein powders with other whole foods, and that slows down the absorption of the protein. And then there's casein protein, which is a slow protein, versus whey protein, which is a faster protein. So there's a lot of nuances to it. But it would be okay to use protein bars and protein powders if the alternative is you just don't meet your protein demand. So maybe at first you use those because they're convenient and easy. That gets you to your protein demand, and then you can work slowly on replacing those items with like a snack cup of Greek yogurt, or a snack cup of cottage cheese, maybe throwing some eggs into a meal to just bump up the protein. Sometimes people put egg whites into like a meal, like say for example, you're making dinner and you want to add some protein. Sometimes people will pour some egg whites in the mix with like a meat. So maybe their portion of meat doesn't have to be bigger because they're adding other protein items to it. But that would be an example of some ways that you can boost protein without actually adding more meat to the diet. So there you go. Hopefully that was helpful. The next question we have is training. In the powerlifting program on Patreon, squats are first in the week ahead of deadlifts. Does it make a difference if I deadlift first in the week instead of squatting? Okay. The reason why they asked, they said, was because they really like deadlifts, so they like to do them early in the week when they feel their best. I would recommend not doing that. I would definitely recommend squatting first in the week and then deadlifting later in the week. It really doesn't matter when in the week as much as it actually relates to the time, the rest time that you would have. So if you squat on Monday, then you have Tuesday and Wednesday as rest, and then you deadlift on Thursday, you then have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as a rest before you then squat. So depending on how you set it up, you might have one of the two lifts, and then you have 2 days off, the other lift, and then 3 days off. It would be better to have the squats first and then deadlift maybe out of the two. For example, it's easier to deadlift with tired legs than it is to squat with a tired lower back or posterior chain, like low back, glutes, hamstrings. The negative impact in regards to recovery drain from deadlifts will have a much more significant impact on your performance in squats than if you were to squat first, and the fatigue that causes won't have as much of a negative impact on your deadlifts. So that would be one of the reasons why, is you're going to perform better in each lift if you squat first, deadlift second. And then another component is, in a powerlifting competition, you have to squat first and deadlift second. So if you're doing the powerlifting program, it would be a good idea to practice as you play. So that way, if you get used to squatting fresh, deadlifting a little fatigued, that would correlate better to what you're going to experience in the powerlifting competition. One of the downsides to deadlifting first in the week is you would likely set up a false set of expectations for then what you would experience in the powerlifting meet. What this means is, if you're always deadlifting totally fresh, you're going to crush some big numbers. But then when you go to a powerlifting meet, and within the same day, within the span of 5 to 6 hours, you've max effort your squat 2 to 3 times, max effort your bench 2 to 3 times, and then you have to deadlift, you're not going to hit those numbers that you've been hitting in training if your deadlift is always fresh. So it's actually better to deadlift a slightly fatigued, maybe later in the week when your CNS is more tired, maybe you haven't had as great of sleep. It's a less than optimal condition, and that's actually beneficial because that's what you're going to feel in a powerlifting competition, is a less than optimal condition. So I would recommend actually squatting first in the week rather than deadlifting. And then some programs, you might have somebody squat and deadlift in the same day. That's totally fine. You would still squat first, deadlift second. One of my elite total powerlifters, she actually has 4 elite totals in 4 different weight classes. We squat and bench on Monday. She deadlifts on Tuesday. We have like a restoration day on Wednesday. We do a squat and bench variation on Thursday. And then we usually don't deadlift again, but if we needed to do some technique stuff, we would deadlift again on Friday. So on hers, for example, we'll have the lifts back to back. So she would squat and then the very next day deadlift. But again, we would still always keep the squat in the most fresh condition and then have the deadlift in the less than optimal condition. So regardless of how you split up your training and in the frequency in which you squat and deadlift, it's going to be much better for you to squat fresh and deadlift with whatever you have left. There you go. Okay, next question. I'd like to know what your ideal target is for the muscle cardio circuits. How gassed should I be? How high should heart rate go per circuit? Is there an expected time frame outside of rest intervals? So what they're talking about, a muscle cardio circuit, is they're doing the functional athleticism program. So the goal is you want to be strong, you want to have very good cardiovascular balance, good muscular endurance, and they're going to likely want to eat correctly to have good visible muscles as well. Just basically be all around badass. That's kind of the goal of the functional athleticism program. In that program, after their movement preparation, their main lifts for the day, maybe some explosive work, we then have like our accessories as a circuit. So maybe they're going to do pull-ups, push-ups, and then walking lunges, and they're going to do that as a circuit. And that's how we typically would finish up those workouts. The muscle cardio circuit, that name implies that we're going to get a cardiovascular stimulus from that structure in those efforts. They're going to be out of breath. But the muscle cardio part is we're using our muscles to do it. So rather than just walking on a treadmill or on a step mill where we're really just using our lungs, we want to blend in weight training so we get the muscular benefits as well as the cardiovascular benefits. That's the idea of the muscle cardio circuit, is doing our muscle-based accessories, but blending a little bit of aerobic stress into that component. If we think of the way in which the program explains how to set up the circuits, I actually want to read through the explanation and then we'll talk about the individual questions that the person asked. So a muscle cardio circuit is practice/warm up all movements so all exercises start the first working set at the same time. Perform exercises as a circuit. The total time to complete the first working set of each exercise equals your active time. The rest time should be half to 2 times the active time, and you can modify your rest to achieve a blend of aerobic and muscular challenge. So we want to start all exercises at the same time for their first working sets. So if we're doing pull-ups, push-ups, and lunges, I want to do whatever I have to do to prepare myself for pull-ups, do whatever I have to do to prepare myself for push-ups, whatever I have to do to prepare myself for walking lunges, get everything ready. And then the first hard set of pull-ups comes right after, like then go right into the first hard set of push-ups, then right into the first hard set of lunges. So boom, boom, boom. And the time it would take me to do the pull-ups, the push-ups, and the lunges in total is my active time. For the simplicity of math, let's just say that it took 2 minutes. Your rest time should be half to 2 times that amount. So your rest time can be 1 to 4 minutes. That's a broad range. But that's very helpful when programming. Again, this is the Patreon service. So really, I don't know exactly who is following this program. It's written for a broad general population. If we're looking to balance the stress of our cardiovascular and muscular systems, some people, if they do 2 minutes of active time, they might be recovered in 1 minute. Others, they might need the full 4 minutes to recover. So the instructions say, modify rest to achieve a blend of aerobic and muscular challenge. If you're trying to go too quickly in your rest time and you're really only feeling the aerobic challenge and the weights you then are using are so light that it's not really stressing the muscles, then we want to slow down. Conversely, if we're taking 4-minute rests, if our active time was 2 minutes, and we're focusing on super heavy weights, but I'm not really out of breath doing that, it's more like just a pure strength challenge, well, then we're not getting the benefit of the muscle cardio component where we want both muscular and cardiovascular stress. So really, we want to modify our rest time so where we create a balance between those two elements. My muscle endurance and strength feel stressed, but also my cardiovascular system feels stressed. So their individual questions is, how gassed should I be? So they're meaning by how out of breath should I be? Exactly like what it says is you want to find a balance. You want to be out of breath that you can feel you're out of breath, but not so out of breath that you can't perform the movements with like decent weight loads, and you're actually limited in the movements because you can't breathe, not because of how heavy the weight is, regardless of how light you make the weight. And we want to be within our rest interval of half to 2 times the active time. So that would be the judgment factors that you would be using to figure out, are you out of breath enough or not enough? Am I within the active rest time recommended? And do I feel a blend of muscular challenge and cardiovascular challenge? The other question they have is, how high should heart rate go per circuit? Individual basis. Some people, their heart rate's not going to go up much. Others, they'll damn near have a heart attack. So that's all individual. I won't know that for each individual. And then, is there an expected time frame outside of the rest intervals? I'm assuming they mean how long should it take me to complete like all the working sets, just whatever it takes to do it. So if it says 3 sets of the exercises, you would do a set of the exercises, find out your active time, take half to 2 times the active time for rest, and then go into the second set, do the same thing for rest, third set, do the same thing for rest, and that's the time it should take. So just follow the instructions, and I'm going to sound like a complete smartass when I say this, but don't make it more complicated than what it is. Oftentimes people just struggle with confidence in themselves. Therefore, they want more parameters. They want things more black and white. Just experiment. Just say, like push yourself through it and say, how did that feel? Did I feel like it was too much cardio and I didn't challenge my muscles enough? Okay, well maybe next time I'll take longer breaks and I'll try a little heavier weight. So just experiment and play with it. But you don't need to have all these extra parameters. We don't need to have a bunch of extra details to it. Just follow it with what it is and work within those parameters. The fun part is if you get remotely close to these parameters, you're going to feel productively miserable. Something in your body will say, that was awful. If we ever do that again, I better get better. So I better get stronger or bigger muscles or better cardiovascular system improvement. It's going to make a positive adaptation in some way. So don't overcomplicate it. Just follow the instructions as is, and that will help a lot. The next question we have, when performing deadlifts or other hip hinge movements, I often get a painful lower back pump. Do you have any suggestions for how to manage this feeling? Yes, we can definitely do a couple things. First would be is to make sure in our workouts on Patreon, there's movement preparation circuit that includes stretching and opening up the glutes, the adductors, the hip muscles. We also work on abdominal bracing and core stability. We do all these elements before we would get to things that are like hinge-based movements. So we want to make sure we're actually taking our time and doing those things. And then if you don't follow our programming, you want to make sure you do that on your own. You want to do something that kind of stretches and promotes openness in your glutes and your adductors. You also want to work on tensioning and flexing your core. You want to have abdominal tension. So when you're performing a hinge movement and you're bending at your hips, you want to have your abs flexed. You're not going to crunch them down like a crunch. You just want to flex as if you're standing and somebody's going to poke you in the belly or punch you in the belly. You just want to flex your abs. And that will help give extra support to the spinal erectors, your psoas, and all the other muscles we have that control our hip tilt positioning. So we want to have our muscles, hip-based muscles, opened and warmed up and stretched, whether that's static or dynamic stretching. Then you want to make sure you have abdominal tension when you do your hinge movements. And then also when we're doing hinge-based movements, you want to think of pushing your hips back, not your shoulders forward. So that can be an issue that sometimes people will have, is the balance point in our feet is the middle of our foot. So if you're standing and you think of looking at yourself from the side, you would stand and you would see that your shoulders, your hips are both over top of the middle of your foot. When performing a hinge movement, we want to push our hips back behind the vertical line of the midfoot. We don't want to think of leaning forward with our shoulders going forward of the vertical line over the middle of our foot. Ideally, we would like to see the hips going back and the shoulders dropping straight down following the vertical line above our midfoot. That is how we do a hinge movement properly to load the hamstrings and glutes and not overly stress the lower back. So we want to stretch our hip-based muscles, most notably the glutes and the adductors. You can definitely throw in hamstrings, hip flexors, psoas, all the other things, but definitely glutes and adductors. We want to make sure we have our abs tensioned. So when you're performing a hinge movement, make sure you flex your abs like somebody's about to punch you. And then we want to think of pushing the hips back, not shoulders forward. All of those things will help you definitely reduce the lower back pump when you're performing hinge movements. And then our last question for this week is a business question. I recently lost a client I had been working with for over 3 years. We reached all of their goals, but they still decided to move on to a new coach. How do you mentally manage when you lose a client especially when you don't believe it was your fault. Oh, that's tough. Okay, definitely happens. And 99.9% of the time it has nothing to do with you, especially if you actually help them reach all their goals. They might have run into a financial problem, maybe they ran into an emotional problem. It's just something going on in their life, and that can be a reason why you might lose a client in general. Now, specifically in their question, they said that they moved on to a new coach. That can be a bit of a sting because they clearly still wanted coaching service. They just, for a lack of a better way of saying it, they didn't want it from you. Oof, that hurts, right? That's awful. This has happened to me for sure. Like one recent scenario was a client is wanting to become a personal trainer. I don't think they don't have their certification yet, but they've been training people. And been coaching people, and they're wanting to learn more and more and more. We worked together for, I think, about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I helped them diet to a new weight class in powerlifting. And along the way, we hit a bunch of PRs. In their last meet with me, they hit PRs and everything. So PR in squat, bench, deadlift, and their total at a new body weight. And they still left to go work with another coach. That sucks. It does. One of the main reasons why is I wouldn't have considered myself done with that person yet, that project. There was still a ton we could do. The majority of the time that I was working with them, I was working with them to correct a hip issue they had from their previous way of training, and we had the diet. So I'm trying to fix a physical ailment and injury while dieting, and then still trying to get them to progress to PRs, and was able to actually do all that, which is actually really freaking hard. So I was really happy with the outcome. But they decided to move to a new coach because they just want to learn more. They want to learn a new approach, a new vision, a new perspective. They likely felt like they learned kind of what they could from me, and now they want to expose themselves to new knowledge, new information, new options. I'm very happy for them. I still follow them on social media and they're kicking butt. I just saw them have a PR in a recent lift, so super excited for them, super happy for them. And that would be the reason why they left, was they wanted to pursue just more new, different, continue to grow their knowledge base. And I'm certainly not going to fault them for that. It's going to make them a better athlete for themselves. It's going to make them a better coach for their clients. So awesome. Who knows? Maybe down the line they learn a couple things, try some fun stuff, and then they come back and we get to do some cool projects together. So I'm always open to having people come back when they want to, and it does happen, which is nice. It's a bummer they leave in the first place, but it's nice when they come back. I've had some other circumstances, though, where somebody was unhappy, and those moments suck. Maybe they reached their goal, maybe they got majority of their goal, but they were unhappy. There could be a million reasons. They wanted greater level of communication than what I was able to give at the price point I was able to give it. So for example, I've had people ask to do like weekly consultations, and it's like, well, that's an amount of time that I would have to charge for, but yet they don't want to pay more for the consultation. And it's like, well, how does that work? So sometimes they want more communication, or another factor would be, this is like not politically correct terminology, but it is what it is. There may be a very type A person, and they wanted to know everything they could possibly know ahead of time. And I couldn't tell them everything, because we didn't know how their body was going to respond. They weren't in the mental space to manage a year's worth of information right now. We're barely struggling to do the 2 or 3 things we're supposed to be doing right now. I'm not going to give you 10 more things to focus on. But they wanted that control. They wanted to know what it was. They kept asking, what do I do next? I'm like, it doesn't matter what's next if we're not doing what we're currently supposed to be doing. So I don't want to give you something else because you're just going to focus on that. And we're already not doing the thing we're supposed to be doing. So let's just focus on this. So we might have just butted heads on that type of approach. Is I wanted them to focus on an element at a time, and they just kind of wanted to know everything right away. And that's that is the way it is. I choose my teaching style because it's what I believe to be best across the thousands of people I've worked with for 25 years. I have a teaching certification. I've taught at the university level for 7.5 years. I have a really good teaching background, both experiential and formal education. So I believe the way I teach people works for most people. However, it might not work for every individual. And that's just something you got to kind of accept. When I have those moments, I always analyze, what did I do and how did I approach it? Could I have, blended a little bit more of what they wanted if I know what they wanted, and not sacrifice the quality and maybe the principles that I thought were best? Or maybe I had no clue why they left, and then I'm just left with like a moment of trying to figure out, can I now retrospectively look back and think of where communication may have fallen apart, or maybe they didn't quite get their best there. Maybe I was delayed in communication because I was traveling. Like, I always want to analyze what I'm doing and am I doing my best. And I always analyze it through the lens of, if I were them and I was paying me money, this amount of money, and I had this set of expectations when we started the process. So we started the service with the expectation of XYZ. Was I giving XYZ? If I wasn't, it's definitely my fault. And I need to look at how I can better give XYZ to the current clients I have so I keep those clients. And often the person you lose when you don't know why you lost them, they typically ghost you. So you can send an apology if you want, but you might not get a response. But it's certainly not a bad idea to send it. And just say, hey, these are the things I was thinking through that maybe I could have done better. I apologize if these were the things that you were upset about. And I wish you the best of luck. If you ever do need anything, please feel welcomed to reach back out. So those are messages I've sent. I do look back through and see if there's things I could have done better. In your question though, if you help them reach all their goals and they still moved on to a new coach, who knows? I mean, it could be a pricing thing. Maybe the new coach promised them the world for a little bit of a cheaper price, and that's just the way it goes. It is just a business component. It's the way the business works. So I would look at what you're doing and just double check if everything you're doing is the best. And then feel confident in yourself by looking at your current clients and your other clients and saying, hey, if all other people seem to be very happy with this and that person wasn't, maybe I don't need to make any changes. Let me just check and see if I have to lose another person, then that's something I definitely got to start looking more into. So it's just a piece of information. I would dive deeper and harder and more into the current clients you have. That'll help you feel more secure with what you do have, more confident in what you currently do, and then maybe help identify ways in which you could make a little bit improvements and do a little better with the way in which you give service to your clients. So hopefully that was helpful. There you go. Those were the questions that we had for this week's Q&A. I answered all the other ones in private messages, but I thought these were fun ones to share in this week's videos. So as I said at the beginning, if you would like to be able to submit your questions for a Patreon Q&A, you can join our Patreon service. It's patreon.com/C3method, the 3 spelled out T-H-R-E-E, so C-T-H-R-E-E method. And then you can always reach out to us at our website, www.c3method.com. Awesome. I think that's everything. If you think these videos are helpful, please share them. Also on the Patreon service, don't forget you get monthly programming. It's programs written for you, but then also templates. You can create your own programs, tons of nutrition information, and you get access to me anytime you want to ask a question. Okay, so I think that was everything. I think that was good. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for watching.